Kay Daigle of Beyond Ordinary Women Ministries, and I'm welcoming you to this video on the burn and burnout. And as we talk about burnout, I am talking to Dr. Michelle Picorni. Michelle did her graduate work on burnout, and so I'm excited to hear what she's going to say. And Michelle, when I used to think about burnout, I didn't exactly know what it was, but I felt like it was just somebody who was so depleted and down that they just probably laid in bed all the time and could do absolutely nothing. So I hope you can clarify for me and for everyone else exactly where the term came from and what it means.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the clinical definition of burnout, which really it's a multifaceted condition comprised of three primary components. One is emotional exhaustion, meaning someone is just so depleted that they don't have much to give anymore. And then the second aspect is depersonalization, and that goes two ways. That's them kind of detaching themselves from their role and also depersonalizing the people that they're ministering to. And so seeing someone as a task rather than an actual person. And then the third aspect in burnout on the clinical side of things is reduced personal accomplishment. So that means that they're not as effective as they used to be in their work. And so that's the clinical definition of burnout. Now the burn and burnout, when the researchers were first putting together this concept and talking with people and hearing about their experiences, they recognized and kind of an image came to their mind of a burned out match. So someone that was just, they'd poured themselves out, but after they'd been lit, they were pretty depleted. And so that's where the burn and burnout came from. A definition that I really prefer to use when I'm talking to people about this is burnout is energy depletion without commensurate renewal. So you've poured yourself out, but you're not getting filled back up. So that's the burn and burnout.
Yeah, that seems like an easy definition. That's good. So as we think about that definition and what you're talking about, what exactly contributes to that? What causes burnout?
Someone to get to that point, right?
Yes.
There's several things that contribute to it, and so I'm just going to highlight a few that are especially applicable to women in ministry. One of those is just demands on their time. We live in such a busy world with constant demands from all over the place that are pulling for our attention and our time. And so just the nature of the world that we live in, women especially have so many roles that they play. And so there's some gender differences. Men often have their job and maybe their fathers and husbands and whatnot, and so they're playing those roles. But women are still often the primary caretakers of home. So they may be working, they may be doing ministry, they may be wives, mothers, and they're also still taking care of the house. And so with all of these things, the demands on the time of a woman is just really quite a bit. So that's one contributing factor. Another factor is demands on their emotions. People are in ministry because they have such a desire to help people. And that is their calling, that's what they love to do. But that can be a very emotionally demanding thing. Often, women that are in ministry are the first responders to a crisis. And so someone that they're ministering to is having a divorce, or they're going through some relational turmoil, or a death in the family. And often it's women that are going to try to comfort and help come alongside that person. And that can be tiring, especially if they're bound by confidentiality in some of these situations. And so there's not really an outlet for them to then put those burdens. So there's demands on our time, demands on our emotions. So many women going into ministry often struggle with issues of identity as well. So often we're thrust into situations that we haven't quite been prepared for. There's not always a class for how to best care for somebody in a crisis. And a lot of this is on-the-job training. And so that can be an emotional demand as women feel inadequate sometimes at what they're doing. And so that's another demand on our emotions. And then finally, there's what's called Messiah complex. And women especially are really, really good at this. That means that they often renounce their own needs for the needs of someone else. And so that's what we refer to as Messiah complex.
I believe I've heard of that, but I haven't necessarily talked to anybody about it in relation to burnout. I know that several years ago, I ended up burning out, and I didn't recognize it at first, and I won't get into all that right now. But I do know that I went to some counseling at the time, and the counselor began to reveal, as she talked to me, that part of my problem was that somehow I thought the whole ministry was going to crash and burn if I did not live up to my own expectations, honestly.
Yes.
So it wasn't anybody putting them on me. It didn't really have anything to do with home or job or any of that. It honestly was just that I felt the whole weight of the ministry on me.
Sure. That's a great segue to the next contributing factor to burnout, and that's the internal and external pressure that we often feel. And I referred to the external pressure already as far as just the expectations that we often feel of the people we're ministering to. But many of us have this internal pressure of perfectionism and people pleasing, and kind of forgetting that God is the creator and we're the created. God is limitless, but we're limited, we're finite. So we don't have to carry the pressure of the whole ministry, but that's really hard to remember sometimes. And so that's definitely another factor that contributes to burnout.
And I really wasn't conscious I was doing that until I talked to her.
Right.
And she began to realize, and she said, well, what do you think will happen if you aren't doing all these things? Well, I don't, and basically it was, I guess I was the Messiah. I don't know,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is a very subtle thing that happens, I think. And we want to do a good job. We want to do things well. But often we're pursuing perfection rather than excellence. And it's an important distinguishing factor to remember those things, perfection versus excellence.
Right.
So,
It is.
And these things can happen even with women not working full-time in ministry, can't they?
Sure.
Because they have, I can think of many of my friends, and I worked as a volunteer for years and years and years, and I'm doing that sometime now too. And I know that I have friends that realized, I don't think they ever met burnout, but they realized that they could not keep carrying the ministry and feeling like they were so responsible for it.
right.
In terms of their whole lives and everything else that they had to do.
Right. There's a term called mental pollution, and it's really referring to women who, because of all the hats that we're wearing, we constantly have all these responsibilities kind of playing in our head. So even if we're at work, we're thinking, oh, I've got to pick up the dry cleaning on the way home, or I need to make sure the dinner's prepared. So this kind of mental pollution makes it hard for us to truly relax and be present sometimes in the moment where we are. So a last contributor to burnout that I'd like to mention is simply spiritual dryness. This may seem like an obvious one, but when the demands on our time, the demands on our emotions, these other factors we've spoken of, it's really easy to let just our own nurture of our spiritual disciplines to slide. And so the studies that have been done have shown that spiritual dryness is the #1 contributor to the stress dimension of burnout, which is emotional exhaustion. So,
Which I think is what threw me off a little bit. I didn't think I was burned out because I didn't feel like I was spiritually dry.
Okay.
And so I thought, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what it is.
sure.
So
So you were probably doing your quiet times and
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
and I had boundaries. I didn't do ministry all the time. I didn't have my kids at home anymore. I mean, I was just really shocked to find out I was burned out.
Right. Well, it's kind of a deep thing sometimes that we don't know that we're burned out until past the point.
Right.
And so I think in the next video we'll be talking about some of those warning signs that contribute to burnout.
Well, great. Well, I hope that you all join us for the third part of our videos. And I do know, let me mention this, that Michelle is going to give us a list of some resources that we'll have on our website to download if you want to pursue some of these thoughts further. Thank you, Michelle.